Hello everyone, welcome to the 12th episode of Choosing the Red Pill with Rajesh and Omer. And today we have with us none other than Mr. Sanjay Jha, who needs no introduction but just a few words about him. He has been a part of Indian National Congress for a long time and even served as the party spokesperson and a Nehruvian Gandhian idealist, as he describes himself, and a person who believes in a healthy democracy, the pluralistic values of India, and someone who believes in speaking truth to the power, and he had to face its brunt as well. So we welcome you, sir. Thank you for joining in. We hope to have a very fulfilling discussion, enlightening discussion with you today. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Omar, and I like what's on your T-shirt. You are ready. That's what I can kind of.
Yes,
And
very much,
I
much
think that was
ready.
a very candid introduction. And whenever they tell somebody that he needs no introduction, that person should never forget that everyone needs a conclusion as well. So you can't keep talking and talking. So thank you very much for inviting me.
Well,
Thank you.
welcome, Mr. Jha, and welcome to Choosing the Red Pill. It's a great pleasure and an honor to have you here today with us. So, Omar has already given your introduction or the no introduction required thing. We all know you. So, I'll straight away dive into what I want to ask you, what I'm dying to ask you. We all agree, we are all liberals in some way or the other. And free speech and dissent are bedrocks of any progressive democratic society. Now, since the Modi government has come to power, it is usually believed that the freedom of speech in India has gone down a notch. But I see a dichotomy here, or even irony to per se. We have an example in front of us, which is you, who has been suspended, I believe personally, for use of his freedom of speech within the party politics. And on the other side, we have a example of Subramaniam Swamy, who ironically literally gets away with anything or everything he says, even against his party or prime minister or anything. So, why? So there's an irony here. While Congress is supposed to be liberal, while there's a perception in the society that the freedom of speech has gone down a notch, and yet we see when we see examples of within the party politics, we see that the free speech is more restricted in Congress than in the BJP. How do you respond to this, sir? And second point would be how what do you think would strengthen freedom of speech and expression in India?
Well, on the first one, let me tell you, the BJP is therefore politically smarter. I mean, Yashwant Sinha, who's been very critical of the government and the BJP, continues to be technically not sacked or suspended or terminated by the BJP. You remember that Shatrughan Sinha and Kirti Azad, very
Yeah,
critical of the
yeah.
BJP, they in fact accused Arun Jaitley of corruption. The BJP did nothing. So the point is, this is why the BJP wins elections. It manages its perception a lot better. Now, if you guys or anybody who's hearing this program want to be very critical of Mr. Modi or take on some other leader in the BJP or the RSS, they'll file an FIR against you, a defamation case against you. They will harass you. And I know many people on social media don't write what they want to write because they're scared of this kind of punitive action, right? Now, the point is, however, the BJP remains under the radar screen. Now, what has the Congress done by actually kind of falling on me like a ton of bricks simply because I asked of internal democracy and I recommended some
Yeah.
constructive changes? They blew out of proportion. So now the BJP is telling the Congress, where is the democracy that you blame us for not practicing? And therefore, the Congress again gets caught on the wrong foot. This is the problem. This is the reason why the Congress party has not been able to manage its entire, what I call as your brand, is getting damaged. And the BJP, which is where, frankly, highly authoritarian, we know how even the judiciary's verdicts have become very questionable. You have a situation today where every institution in this country, from an NGO, the RBI, the Election Commission, the NIA, you look at any of the biggest institutions in India, but let's not even talk of ED and the CBI and income tax. They all seem to be under the BJP's what I call as the juggernaut, the
Right.
massive weight of BJP's strategies have to be carried on. So I do believe that there's a lesson here for the Congress. Now, the Congress is traditionally supposed to be more liberal and democratic than the BJP.
Yes.
It actually is, hurting itself by taking decisions in a unilateral fashion, by actually sacking me on live television. I think, the party itself has, demonstrated a peculiar regressiveness, now, which is deeply unfortunate. I continue to be a Congress guy, although they have suspended me because I think it's a ridiculous and
Well, it's
very
more of an
imbecile.
ideology, I believe, and since you subscribe to that ideology, you will continue to do so.
Exactly. And I think to answer the second part of your question, frankly, the freedom of speech is something that we all have to fight for relentlessly. I mean, let's look at what happened in Kashmir, an internet lockdown for the longest period of time, a shutdown. And internet today is considered to be part of your constitutional rights as a freedom that you should be able to access. Now, end of day, when you look at the BJP today, whether it's authors, rationalists, media, intellectuals, cinema, I mean, people wanted to chop off Deepika Padukone's head.
Right.
Today, for example, if anybody tries to get too aggressive, the social media throws them down. So these are the realities of our time. And I think the only way you can fight it is through a combination of the political mainstream parties like the Congress speaking out. But civil society will have to be the biggest, change agent, the
Right.
catalyst change. If you look at the way after the CA, NRC, and NPR, India actually got together in a very voluntary, spontaneous exhibition of protest. And the government had no answers to it. Shaheen Bagh, where the grandmothers of Shaheen Bagh threatened the whole government, right? That was like the Anna Hazare agitation that briefly, shall we say, fluttered in 2011 before it
Right.
became an RSS sponsored movement. So the truth of the matter is that civil society, people like Omer and you and me and all of us have to fight, and political parties need to be standing out there and voicing our concerns.
Well, sir, I personally have a different stance on NRC and CAA, which is a different off-topic thing. But what I'm trying to say is, yes, I completely agree that in a democratic society, people have a right to protest because that's what decides which side you are going. As a progressive society or as a regressive society. So yeah, I completely agree with you that people, when if they have if you don't agree with any of the policies of the government, they should have the complete freedom and right to protest, and they should do so whenever they want.
Right. So I think two points that have been what I take from what Jha sir has said is like, first of all, the freedom of speech is something that we all have to fight for as a society. So that is very important and something that Congress can learn, how to manage things. And because, like sir said, it is hurting itself. And anyone who believes in a healthy democracy and a strong opposition would certainly agree with that. Now, sir, you mentioned the CANRC, and there are some more things that have happened over the last year. This Ayodhya verdict came, and the Article 370 was abrogated. So there are a lot of things that happened, and it is being said that the syncretic culture, the pluralistic nature of the country that has so many linguistic groups, religious sects, they have been coexisting for centuries. So, do you think that we are going downhill in some direction? Is that cohesion, that pluralism is under some sort of threat, or what are the ways in which we can mend it as a society? What do you think?
You see, I do maintain that India's secular diversity can overwhelm and overpower any what I call as a sectarian project. The Hindutva project, for example, is a majoritarian might project to say that, well, the
Right.
majority religion must have the complete say in governance, laws, legislation, and its status in society. Now, there is no denying that at the moment, India's religious plurality, as you mentioned, or its multicultural uh, character or halo, is under some duress. That cannot be denied. There is no denying again that the BJP remains under the thumb rather of Nagpur. The RSS really calls the shots. Uh, like it or not, Hindu Rashtra is the long term goal of the Sangh Parivar. Mr. Modi himself, and I have tweeted it just the other day, that Mr. Modi, if you remember, has very proudly won the badge of being the Hindu Hriday Samrat. You see, you got to give BJP the credit for being terribly, you know, blasé or, totally brazen about the fact that, listen, we represent the larger Hindutva sentiment in our country. Now, the question is that it does not make them the custodians of the great religion of Hinduism. In my
Right.
opinion, Hinduism and Hindutva are two different. I'm a Hindu. I'm a come from a very traditional Mithila Brahmin community of Bihar, but I have never been told that you should be hostile to one religion or be inimical to another. We grew up, kind of completely believing in India's social harmony. The fact that today you have, everything has got a color of what I call as a communal complexion is deeply disturbing. I'm not just talking about deaths in lynching violence in India. I'm talking about the fact that when the Prime Minister says that you can make out who the perpetrators of violence are by their clothes, then you do begin to worry. When the Prime Minister talks about Kabristan and Shamshan, then you do know that there is some degree of communal politics being very blatantly played out at the highest level. So there is a lot of
Absolutely.
what I call as a dog whistle politics in India. So there is concern. Absolutely, Omar. I will not deny there is serious concern at the moment. And I do believe that the only way forward, if you look at Kashmir, Muslim majority state, overnight, Article 370 is gone. The CA, NRC, NPR is a definite, clear strategy, not just looking at Assam and West Bengal from BJP's political angle, but also to make minorities generally feel insecure and threatened all over the country. To say this, and you better be prepared to be a second class citizen in the great democracy of India. Already, there are so many leaders who talk about removing secularism from the constitution. Remember, L.K. Advani mocked it by calling it pseudo secularism. I think the problem is also with the liberal parties or the secular parties like the Congress, who have become very apologetic about being secular. I think you ought to be very proud and say, I'm secular. Why not? I mean, secular party is actually equal to each and every religion or equidistant to every religion. But basically, it means you are tolerant to every faith. So we should be happily going and saying we are pro Hindu, we are pro Muslim, we are pro Christian, we are pro Sikhs, we are pro Buddhists, we are pro Jains. Why not? I mean, you are pro all religions. It doesn't have to be either or, right? This is not about either or. It's like me having a choice to have both porridge as well as a yogurt, as well as a white egg, as well as some toast for breakfast. I don't have to have just one item. So you can actually have whatever you like. So end of the day, that is what is religious freedom. And I do believe that we need to stand up and fight for it. Because if we don't, I do believe the beauty of India has always been the fact that we have been able to go to the outside world and say that there are several religions, so many castes, many of them born in India. The religions have been born in our country. We all coexist in great tranquility and serenity in our society. If we lose this big strength, this singular USP, if I can use that, I think the India story, the idea of India, as we call it very popularly, will gradually get decimated. And that will be a tragedy.
So thank you very
Yes,
much for that answer. And uh, funny part is here you said you are a Hindu and a Brahmin. Here are two atheists sitting in front of you, one from the Muslim background and one from a Hindu background. And if Omer can be atheist and he can be alive, it's only in India. I mean, mostly. In most of the Islamic countries, he wouldn't be. So that's a funny part here. But I completely agree. And thanks to the history of the pluralist culture of India, we can be atheists in India. Doesn't matter whether we come from Muslim background or a Hindu background. Now, anyways, so now I want to ask you a question, sir, just before we end. A strong democracy needs a strong opposition, right? And but we all agree that Congress is nowhere near to that being a strong opposition right now. How do you see Congress getting a foot on the ground of this leadership crisis that we all see it is in, or we perceive that it is in? Or do you think Congress stocks falling further?
Well, what I like about your question is that you haven't minced any words. The Congress is no. There's no denying that the Congress, the great Congress party, the great grand old party, is facing a very, very serious internal crisis. Cannot be denied, and it's organizational. There is a lot of emasculation of the strengths of the party. We have become weak. Our foundations have become fragile. We are not able to reach the grassroots and connect with the same people who voted us for 10 of the 17 general elections.
Right.
Congress has governed 54 of the 72, 73 years. I mean, this has happened because the people voted the Congress. That's the kind of popularity and the confidence people had in our party. Then clearly there has been a trust deficit between the Congress party and the people at the ground level who vote.
Right.
And this is the tragedy that the Congress party has to completely and very quickly correct. Otherwise, we are going to see another rout happening in 2024. The other problem, as you mentioned, is also ideological. I think Omar brought it up. The fact that the Congress party is not able to take a stance on issues, clarity and transparency driven, is what has made us very suspect in the eyes of many people. I can tell you the majority of Hindus have voted for the Congress all these years, but today there is an impression that we are anti-Hindu. I mean, this is a ridiculous proposition, but the Congress has not handled that well. As I said, we need to go out and say we are secular with pride. I do not deny that today there have been times when the party may have played in opportunistic politics. But the Congress party will never go ahead and create a communal riot. The Congress party will never go ahead and intentionally create what happened in Delhi or in Muzaffarnagar or in Gujarat 2002. So these are also realities that we need to accept and acknowledge. I think the problem that we have had is the fact that we don't articulate or politically communicate these things in a proper sense. As a result, the BJP says Congress is doing minority appeasement. We have no answers. The Congress party is anti-Hindu. I think that's absolute rubbish, and it still manages to find space in the public's mind.
Do
I
you
mean,
think do you think it is because the real meaning of secularism is actually to be equidistant from all religions and that's not followed properly?
well, I can tell you one thing. I mean, all I understand is that, you basically are saying that everyone coexists with each other, respecting each other's faith. Now, whether you choose to be equal to all or equidistant to all, it comes to the same thing. The larger point, however, and I think that's a question that needs to be answered, is that today, if we do not address this issue head on, then the Congress party will face a serious problem. So it's ideological, it's organizational, and to answer your question, it is definitely leadership driven. I mean, Mr. Gandhi, frankly, fought a very good campaign in 2019. The people of India rejected that. They said, listen, we want a more nationalist government, a government which is more focused on national security. There were no jobs in 2019. It has got worse. At farmer suicides were high. That has got more dismal. Industry was in recession. It's now gone into a depression. Foreign policy was in tatters. You know what's happening in Ladakh. Pandemic, this government cannot handle it. We have exceeded 2 million cases. I mean, currently the country is in a serious, shall we say, social, economic, political black hole. However, if the Congress party is not being seen as an alternative and Mr. Modi still remains popular, then you have a problem. You see, I keep telling people in my party, if the BJP comes and says India needs a strong opposition, that means the Congress has something very serious to worry about because the BJP is
Right.
worry about the opposition. So I do believe that these are issues we need to address. Mr. Gandhi resigned in 2019 saying there should be a new leader, a non-Gandhi leader. And I think the Congress's
Did
working
he say that
committee
actually?
party down. They should
Did
have
he?
a non-Gandhi leader, and I'm sure even if Rahul Gandhi or Priyanka Gandhi Vadra are they're anyway part of the party, they'll be amongst the biggest vote catchers. They will still be amongst the biggest assets of the Congress party.
Right.
But you can put a new leader who goes out there and creates a new dynamism. And always when there is change, I can promise you, it is usually for the better. So I remain very optimistic that the Congress party will resolve its leadership conundrum, and then hopefully we'll get our act together.
I guess they have to
There's a
have two
puzzle.
different. I guess they have to have a chairman who's separate and a CEO who's separate from them.
Yeah, so there is a popular perception that not only that the Congress is being portrayed as not only anti-Hindu but anti-India at some times, which is funny because yeah, and this is something that Congress leadership needs to worry about because from the time of independence until Indira Gandhi, and so we have had some very strong leaders who were whose nationalistic credentials cannot be questioned, who were deeply patriotic. And so today, when someone says that Congress is anti-India and anti-Hindu, so the leadership needs to worry about that something has gone seriously downhill, and people need to know what Congress stands for people to be able to reject it or accept it. People do not even know what Congress stands for anymore, whether it's Ram Mandir issue or 370. So there are fractions that disagree with each other. So I think
Well,
that crisis
short,
needs to be
short,
resolved.
short answer to your question. Are you done? Are you done? Then I'll.
Yeah, yeah, sure. Yes.
My short answer to your question before we wrap up. You see, this is what I mean that these are such preposterous, absurd, and atrocious charges being made against the Congress party. For heaven's sake, I mean, in today's political discourse, I mean, the fact that one is questioning any party, forget the Congress, nobody can question the Congress. This is the party that actually liberated India. I mean, the Congress doesn't have to explain itself to anybody. It's a ridiculous. It's like these are what trolling is all about, right? This is what the BJP IT cell trolls and call somebody anti-national, go to Pakistan. That's a substandard, crappy, third grade, pedestrian, puerile discussion. I don't want to even get into it. It's too cheap and coarse to be even crude to be even commented upon. My larger point is, yes, you're right, that the Congress party has to understand that there is fake news out there is distorted news out there is post-truth which is happening, there are alternate facts which are being sold, and human beings are vulnerable. WhatsApp is now a manufacturing factory of fake news. So the Congress has to understand that people don't know India's history anymore. People do not know what happened during the Bangladesh. So I do believe, I agree with you there, that it's a ridiculous situation. We are living in a dystopian universe, and the
Yeah.
Congress has to be real, down to earth. Use technology, use television, use social media, get out there and have conversations. And I'm very sure if we do it aggressively, people will realize that they're dealing with so much of bunkum. But the fact that we are losing time and space, that's not good news. But I remain optimistic. I'm an eternal believer that truth will win. And I do feel that the people of India will recognize that the democracy and the freedom matters a lot more to them than just the bread and the GST and the FDI.
Three cheers to that.
Thank you.
So I really hope the message of Sir goes a long way and people understand that it is very important to fight for freedom of speech and the syncretic pluralistic culture of India that makes India India. So I thank once again Sanjay Jha sir for joining us today and gracing our show. And I hope our viewers got to learn many things, and it was enlightening for us also. So thank you for your time, sir, and we really appreciate that.
Thank you very much. Take care. Huh? Lovely. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Thank you. Thank you,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Jha. Thank you for coming on choosing the red pill. And I really enjoyed the conversation with you. I really hope to see you again sometime soon when you have little more time at hand.
Sure. And had you called your program the Blue Pill, I would have said you guys got tons of energy that you want to talk about.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye bye, sir. Thank you. Take care.